Good morning. That was a start I didn't see coming. um, well, I'm glad I have notes because whatever I remembered, I don't remember anymore. um, today, I really wanted to talk to you about the importance of the holy days, the Sabbath, and how important it is that we do keep them. And by now I expect that all of us have kind of gotten into our own routines here at the feast, and getting into that groove is a difficult thing to do sometimes, but it's important to start out with your routine, and it really gets your day going right, and one little thing can really set it off. I'm sure that some of you, I don't know where every single one is from. I would need a map and some pins maybe to know. But I'm sure some people are from larger cities. We're not from a big town, but we're around a couple of larger cities. But I work in Jefferson City, Missouri. A few of you probably know where that's at. And that's the capital city. It's about 3 hours north-ish of here. And in May of this year, they began working on one of the two Missouri River bridges there, and they have been working on that thing. I imagine some of you had to cross over that coming here today, or this week anyway, but they've been working on that, and so it's become really important for me to have my routine down and be able to move and avoid traffic, basically. Running just a couple of minutes behind of what I'm used to can really set me way, way behind on my day. Having structure in your life is actually a good thing, though. I know you all know that, I'm sure. But all that planning and preparation for each and every day, it doesn't do you a lot of good if you forget anything at all, does it? But today, I'd just really like to talk about our structure and our routine, but not really the routine and structure that we set forth daily for ourselves, but the routine that God has set in place for us and the structure that comes along with it. And what I'm talking about is God's Sabbaths. In the beginning, God created all things on earth and in the heavens in 6 days. And in Genesis 2 and verse 2 and 3, you can read, you don't have to turn there, we've all seen it a few times, I'm sure, that on the seventh day God ended his work which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all the work which he had done. And then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which God had created and made. And we already see the importance of the weekly Sabbath day right there, and I can go into the other scriptures. We can go to Exodus 20. We don't need to do that. We've all been there. We've seen these things, and I have to kind of shorten this thing up just a little bit. I have a feeling it could have been a little long. So, also, when it comes to his holy days that we keep, all of his Sabbaths that he has proclaimed and made holy for us and commanded us to keep, we can find those in Leviticus 23 and along with other various places. And we don't need to go through all of that today. We've heard quite a bit about it. But in reality, what affects our observance of God's Sabbaths is actually our own perception of the importance of these Sabbaths that God created for us, and and how we feel like it affects us. That is really what forms your loyalty and your reliability to God when it comes to all the Sabbaths, all the holy days, the weekly Sabbath. And also, I'm just going to refer to this. We don't need to turn to Mark 2, verse 27. But Christ states that the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. God, He did not create us so He could force you and I to observe the Sabbath or the holy days. He created man, and then He created the Sabbaths. And it seems very easy to keep the Sabbath whenever you consider that it was actually made for us rather than us made for the Sabbath. We were built with our own free will, which can unfortunately cause us to get to a point where we think we can sort of control and maybe manipulate the meaning of the Sabbath. And its meaning, the Sabbath day, all the Sabbaths, they are not our day to make what we want out of them. And that's something to remember. God created it, all of these days, and they are His days that we are commanded to observe, and we are commanded to observe them the way that He told us to. Our minds form opinions of everything we see and everything we do, all the things we hear every day. That includes the scripture that we read. We comprehend those things, and God helps us to understand what we're seeing. And without the Spirit in us, we wouldn't understand. We'd be kind of like the rest of the world, I guess. But our minds are incredibly complex. We all wake up and have the choice each day to use our minds for good and be a positive influence on the world that we live in, or we can use our minds and our gift as evil. And for us to say that we've never used our minds for evil, well, you're kind of lying to yourself, because we're all sinners. None of us are perfect here. So we know that there's always more things to work on, ways that we can improve our own selves, and we ought to be doing that. It is your duty and mine to make sure that we don't let our minds overcomplicate or change our perception of certain things, because we have the ability to accidentally, but possibly permanently, change our perception, damage the way we remember things, the way we think of things, very important things. And I know that in cases like that Satan's ready. He's waiting out there, and he's ready to help you figure out just exactly what you're trying to figure out. But he's not going to help you make the right decisions. He's not. But the topic today, the Sabbaths, how important it is for us to keep our focus on the days that God created, rather than focusing on whatever the world's got going on today. And on every Sabbath, the weekly Sabbath to us is just that. It's the Sabbath day that we are commanded to keep holy, and we know that. But to the rest of the world, that is not the Sabbath. That is simply Saturday. It's just another day. A weekend, maybe they can go out and have some fun, whatever, but we are commanded to keep the Sabbath. We all are, and we understand that here, though. But it's incredible to consider, and something maybe that we should all remember, that those 2 days, although they do share the same daylight, the Sabbath and Saturday are actually 2 completely different days. And the Sabbath is the day that our Creator made for us. And He commanded us to set it aside and keep it holy, and to honor and worship our Creator. And that's what we do. And Saturday is just a day, another day named by man, made just come out of thin air, named after Saturn's day, named, named after Saturn, the Roman Italic god of agriculture. It's pretty incredible, the difference. Let's see. I'd like to actually turn to Romans chapter 12. Somehow or another, I managed to get the where I was supposed to go on the page that I just flipped from. Romans chapter 12. Just the first couple of verses here in Romans 12, verses 1 and 2. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. We all get to choose what we call it, even every week. And it's all of our duty each week to call the Sabbath day exactly what it is, the Sabbath day. And that's what I go with, and I know you all do too. And for that reason, God created that day specifically, and all of these days, the feast days, for us. I'm getting to be a little mess up here. And we ought to, because we are commanded to, set everything aside in our daily lives for this one day, for the Sabbath day, for the Feast of Tabernacles, just like we have, and completely let God into our lives and forget about all of the worries of the world. We all have lots of worries, and this is our time to be with God and to focus on Him just like He wants us to. And we doing that, we learn more about our destiny and the things to come, and we can be more excited rather than just worrying all the time at news and all the terrible things going on. These are the times when we need to strictly be focused on God and forget about all that. So should we follow the routines of every Sabbath doing the same thing over and over? Of course we should. We were commanded to do the same thing every Sabbath. We were commanded to congregate and for the Sabbath and the holy days and studying and praying throughout them, and that's how we worship our Creator and learn about our purpose. I'm going to turn to Hebrews 10. And I'm going to read in Hebrews 10 verses, well, I'll begin in verse 24. And let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as is the manner of some, but exhorting one another, and so much more as you see the day approaching. God didn't command us to keep every other Sabbath holy, or whichever holy days we see fit. He didn't only make the holy days and the Sabbaths that we can keep holy. He commanded us to observe each and every Sabbath and holy day that He created. And He expects us to do that. I'm going to use a word that no one wants to hear right now, but I wrote the reference down, so I have to. It doesn't matter if it snowed a foot. That was the bad word. I don't think I'm supposed to use that word yet. It's a little early in the season. I usually get screamed at for using the word snow this time of year. But it doesn't matter if it snowed and service was canceled one Sabbath, or if you have the flu or you're just too ill one way or another to make it. That does not just make it another Saturday. It's still the Sabbath, and it's still a holy day, just the same. And we just read, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together. And we don't want to be like others. And that's why we're here today. We need to be urging one another and pushing each other in the right direction. That's one of our purposes as well. So let's stir up love and good works. And just as the end of verse 25 there said, so much more as you see the day approaching. And that makes me wonder, do you see the day approaching? Yeah, we all see that day approaching when, well, we may not be able to be together due to the world conditions. We don't really know what's coming. But we can read the news, see the news. You don't even have to do that hardly to know that there are a lot of things heading our direction, and I don't see any good news coming out of the world anytime soon. So we are waiting for that day to come whenever our Lord and our Savior returns and sets us straight. I anxiously look forward to that. I made a couple of silly questions here that I'm going to go ahead and ask. Did you know that most religions don't believe that the true Sabbath should be observed? Did you know that? Yeah, I think you knew that. That's so funny. I don't know why I would write that down, just because I think it's, the Sabbath day is so obvious and clear in my mind that it's hard for me to wrap my mind around how people get around it. I don't understand, but I guess that's a good thing. Most religions do admit that the Sabbath is indeed the seventh day, or just Saturday as they call it. But they do believe that's the old law, and where they get that, we'll probably never know. Did you know that they believe that it is acceptable and actually better to observe the first day of the week as the Sabbath? That's crazy. I do know that my entire family does that, and they think it's okay, and that's what I hear about all day and all night. Well, that's not acceptable, and we all know that's not acceptable, and I attempt to explain it gently, but in one ear and out the other, just like you would expect, I guess. God made the Sabbath day holy, and He sanctified it. He didn't make any other day of the week holy for the Sabbath, and you can't just change the calendar and make Monday the first day of the week, like some people think you can. It is God's day. No other day can replace it. Do you feel God's presence here in this room at the Feast of Tabernacles? Have you felt that here? Well, it's absolutely amazing the feeling you get. We come down a couple of days early, and you can feel the difference when we all come together. This goes from just a place out in the woods to God's meeting place. He sent us all here, and boy, you can really feel the Spirit in this room. Does that mean, since God is here on, yesterday was a Sabbath, tomorrow's a holy day, for example, that since I know God's here, if I go to work, which I won't be going to work, I promise, that's too far away for tomorrow. But if I know God's here, does that mean that if I go to work, God won't know? Of course it doesn't. That's crazy, right? God is with us. He's with us everywhere we go. And I have this scripture, Job 34, written down, and I just about turned to the exact page right there. And I was just going to read this really quick. Job 34:21, where it says, "For his eyes are on the ways of man, and he sees all his steps. So we better watch it, especially on the Sabbaths and holy days, right? We better watch it. And so we know, obviously, when God's Sabbath is. We know when the holy days are. We have calendars for that, and we can confirm that. And we know that we have to attend service. So how does that kind of affect your perception of God's Sabbaths? I said that we have to attend service, but in reality, no one can make you. And God gave you the free will to do with that day what you want. But he also commanded you to keep the Sabbath. So it's up to you what you do with it. And I know that God has been disappointed in us all one time or another. But we ought to be observing all of these Sabbaths and be together. You know, it is completely different. There are some people that I've heard about that live so far away from the nearest congregation that there's just not a feasible way to make it. And that is a circumstance that God understands, I would say. And he knows exactly how committed to him that each of us truly are anyway. And, you know, this is not anything about those people who just are unable to make it. God did make the Sabbath day holy and all of the holy days to let us know that we should be observing them. And just like I've said, he lets us all make up our own minds about what we do. But he does know as well exactly what we've made priority over his holy days. I could come up with any old excuse I want to say that I didn't make it. I had a flat tire or something crazy. If I felt like doing that, of course. But you would never know any difference. I would never know any difference if you told me why you were gone. I would never know. But God knows. And we ought to be very cautious and make sure we're doing the best that we can. He isn't only with those of us who are here today. He is actually with us all. It's incredible. I go right down this little hill here back to the valley down here. And those two buildings down there, that's where we're staying. I can go right there, a few feet away just about. I have zero signal on my cell phone. And you know, there are several places like that, but knowing that you're kind of out of touch is sometimes scary and sometimes it's a good thing. I kind of like it. But, you know, your signal with God always keeps track of you. And his signal doesn't get weak. His signal doesn't break unless you break it. God is always watching and obviously always protecting us. So, what is your perception of all the holy days and the Sabbaths? Are they the way that God intended for them to be to us? We should love them. And I know we do. They kind of hold me together, I'm not going to lie to you. But I hope that today maybe I've caused you to think about it a little bit more and enhanced your belief and maybe heightened your perception of these days. It's pretty easy to get to feeling down and get into a rut and feel like you need some change and you need to do something different. And that's pretty easy in those vulnerable times to kind of get off track and go a different direction, a direction that you may even think is making you closer to God. But in reality, sometimes you're moving away from God. And we should be very mindful of those things and keeping the Sabbaths. Well, that's a huge part of it. That'll help keep us all on track. And it's, I hear people say, I haven't heard people say it here, of course, but there's always next Sabbath. There's always next Sabbath. We can do it next Sabbath. I can go next Sabbath, whichever, however it works. There are many circumstances to maybe hearing something like that. I don't remember the last time I heard anything like that, but you can say that, and it may just be true, but it won't always be true. There won't always be a next Sabbath for us all. I may miss a Sabbath here or there, and you may too. But every time that I don't make it for whatever reason, I think last year, it was actually about this time last year, I came down with pneumonia, something terrible. I've never had that before, and it was not, I don't recommend it. Don't get pneumonia. That's coming from me. Don't get pneumonia, okay? That's a bad thing to get. But, when I miss a Sabbath, I missed one then, and I can feel it in my heart, and it really saddens me, and I really don't like it. I didn't miss the Sabbath, but I did miss the congregation. That's what I missed. It was still a Sabbath, just like I said earlier. I don't ever want to miss a service that I can spend time with my family, the only people that I really think alike. We think just alike, and I don't have any physical family out there that thinks like I do. And they don't talk about it to me, but I'm pretty sure they talk about it to each other. I'm pretty sure they think I'm crazy. But that's okay. Their day's coming. There was a little scenario that popped into my head. I drive back and forth to work on what you wouldn't think would be a very dangerous highway. I'm not going to lie to you. It's pretty straight, couple hills, no big deal, and it's only about 20 miles from home. But I have never seen more debris on a road. It is crazy. So I was thinking, what if, something happened and there's some terrible accident? You never know, and I don't like thinking about things like that, but it's good for you too. It is. But what if I was in a terrible accident heading to work, and the Sabbath before, I'm just, kind of throwing a scenario out there. What if I said the Sabbath before, well, I'll just make it next time. And I didn't make it to the next time. My final thought, I imagine, I don't know, I hope it never happens, I would think would be missing my family. That one last time, that last Sabbath that I had, why would I miss it? Why would I miss it? So anyway, I love my family, and that's you guys. And it's a difficult thing for me to think about missing a Sabbath service or any holy day. It's a difficult thing. And, in my mind, I'm just overwhelmingly blessed to be able to be here and spend time with you all and just talk and talk about the things that we believe in. You know what? We all believe the same, and it's so nice to not have to argue about it. You can't teach the world anything, can you? I don't, at this point in my life, let's see, it's been, I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but if I'm counting right in my head right here, right now, I believe this is my 13th feast. That's not a lot, but I don't, especially compared to some other people, it's a lot for me, but I don't take you all for granted, and I hope that you all don't take anyone else for granted. We don't have forever yet. Not here, we don't. We do need to be thinking about all of our brothers and sisters when we wake up tomorrow morning. If you wake up and you're just so tired and you really don't feel like getting out of bed and you're thinking, well, maybe I'll just wait till Sabbath. I hope you jump out of bed and get ready. That's what you're going to have to do. Don't let Satan influence you, because that's Satan's goal, is to make you miss. any way that he can. He's tempting you and trying to trick us all. He's always trying to trick us all into thinking that there will always be a next time. And what do you think Satan's goal is for us? He desperately wants there not to be a next time for any of us. He doesn't want us to make it to next Sabbath. But without God's protection this morning, driving in or walking in, you never know what could have happened. God protects us everywhere, everything we do. We have His protection. This is our time. Just as we are, we should all be obeying God's command to be here at the Feast of Tabernacles and encouraging all of our spiritual family to do the same. And in that, don't forget that we are commanded to observe all of the Sabbaths together. One Sabbath, or maybe possibly one of these times you say, well, we're going to do it next feast, or whatever, that may not come. You don't know when the last one is for any one of us. So don't let our last day of the feast, or maybe someone's last Sabbath, be without you. We all count on each other. And I know how much I feel the love between each and every one of you to each and every one else. So we really need to work hard to make sure that our Sabbaths we spend together as a family. And I know that there are some situations you can't help, but I know that also that you're doing your best, and I'll be definitely doing my best to be there every day I can. I wanted to end with the scripture. I believe it's over here now. It started out over there, but our theme for the feast in 1 Corinthians 16:13. You don't have to turn to it. It's right there. It says, watch, stand fast in the faith, be brave, be strong. And I couldn't help but think in my mind one more word at the very end of that. I would say watch, stand fast in the faith, be brave, be strong, together. Together. That's the important thing. I'll never get enough of this time with you all. We're just going to stay another week. I'm going to lock the doors and good luck. Good luck. So yeah, we can't afford to let our guard down, and I can't believe that we're already to this point of the feast, but may God be with you all until we meet again.
Got to get hooked up here or I'll hear from Carl. Good morning, everyone. No time for crooked Hillary's joke because they're already bringing food out. Now, let us hear the conclusion of the matter. Brethren, those words were spoken by a young man. And this gentleman had it all. He had great insight. He had fame, along with deep understanding. His wisdom surpassed all the men of the East and all the men of Egypt. Along with that, this young man had immense wealth. And brethren, by the standards of our society today, one could say truly, this man had it all. I'm not speaking about a rock star, movie star, or a rapper. His wisdom and knowledge was actually so great that he could have been a professor at any major university, Harvard or Yale. Because you see, people from all over the world, including kings, came to hear this man teach. He lectured on plant life, animal life. This young man was anointed king over all of Israel by his father David. And when he was young, God appeared to him in a dream and asked this young man, "What do you desire?" His answer was astounding. If you would, let's turn to 1 Kings. 1 Kings chapter 3. Now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king instead of David my father. I am but a little child. I do not know how to come in or go out. In verse 8, thy servant is in the midst of thy people, which you have chosen, a great people that cannot be numbered nor counted for multitude. Verse 9, give therefore your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, that I may discern between good and evil. For who is able to judge this so great a people? Let me ask you a question real quick. How would you like to have penned that prayer and had it written in God's holy word? You know, every time I've read those words, it just does something to me. I know when I was a young man, I don't think I could have asked for that. In this world today, how many people care about discerning between good and evil in our society? And you know what? Almighty God was impressed too, brother. Because you see, God added so much more to King Solomon. So much more than just wisdom. Bill Gates is estimated to be worth about $40 billion. John D. Rockefeller was worth about 380. Donald J. Trump is worth about 10 billion. Brother, that's really more money than you and I can even imagine. How did Solomon become so wealthy? We're going to talk about that. Solomon received from his inheritance from King David between $5 and $10 billion. Also, he received 666 talents of gold every year. Now, Solomon reigned for 40 years, brethren. At the market price of gold today, it would be around $1 billion. Each talent in weight is equal to 75 pounds. So that means Solomon received 25 tons of gold per year. That's astounding. Okay, another way he received his wealth is through heavy taxation. Also, Solomon received tribute money. All the surrounding kingdoms paid King Solomon tribute. Solomon also owned a fleet of merchant ships for commerce. And also he received gold and silver from other nations. In his 40-year reign as king, I checked several different articles. I got a low ball figure and a high ball. One article estimated Solomon's wealth at $2.3 trillion. Another article estimated his wealth at $200 trillion. More than enough to pay off our national debt, brother. Gold was so prevalent during the time of King Solomon's reign. Do you know what silver was worth? About the size of a small stone. Silver was worthless. But let me ask you this. Is this the conclusion of the whole matter? Okay, man, I'm going to talk about something else that y'all might enjoy. King Solomon loved women. And folks, when I say he loved women, it is an understatement. This gentleman had a lot of wives, about 700 of them. And so I guess since that was not enough, he took unto himself 300 concubines. At my age, it really gets tiresome thinking about that. But you know, if you're a young man, you might think, oh boy, how great that would be. Beautiful women from all over the world. And I can almost guarantee you that not a one of them looked like Rosie O'Donnell. But you know, seriously, you think about 700 wives, 300 concubines. I couldn't afford to build the bathrooms for them. Okay, let's add shoes, clothes, makeup. How many pairs of shoes do most ladies have? Any idea? So you would have to decide, what are you going to do with all these ladies? I mean, where are they going to live? Because I can tell you that a double wide just won't cut it, folks. So Solomon, he built many palaces and homes, and he actually had one palace in the forest of Lebanon. King Solomon made Hugh Hefner look like a pauper. On a serious note, Solomon had what many in our society long for, lust after, would do anything for, brethren. But now, is this the conclusion of the whole matter? Ecclesiastes 1:2. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. What does that word mean? Worthless, trivial, pointless. Aren't those very somber words coming from a man who had so much, who had pretty much attained everything in life that a man could desire? In his old age, Solomon disobeyed God, and he allowed his wife to turn his heart. But toward the latter end of his life, in his writings, King Solomon tells us, brother, what really is important. Because, you see, this man wrote 3,000 Psalms and over 1,000 songs. As for me, I cannot judge Solomon that harshly. The times we're living in, the times we're going to face, I've often wondered, what could turn my heart? Have you ever thought about what could turn your heart? I want to go back to about 3 decades. An organization I was a part of for a while. Many of you out there know, just as I know, so many who had their hearts turned. I'm not going to go into that. Time won't permit. It's totally for another sermon. But what could turn your heart from God? Believe me, Satan knows what can turn your heart. He knows. I don't remember many stories from days of worldwide, but this one particular story stands out first and foremost in my mind. After services, we were standing around having a conversation, and I heard several people say, "Oh, I would never leave God's church." Some of those very people I heard say that are no longer living God's way of life. And I thought, that was a pretty powerful statement for a human being. Because that's all we are, human beings. We cannot compare to the power, the influence of Satan, brother. So what is really important? All the wealth, the money. Let's hear what the preacher has to say about that. In the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 12, verse 13. Now, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God, keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Verse 14, for God will bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it is good or whether it is evil. Sometimes I wonder if people in God's church really take that seriously. I really look forward one day, God willing, I can make it into this kingdom. I want to sit down and have a talk with King Solomon. What do y'all think I'd like to talk to him about? Okay, the men got it. About his 700 wives. I'm getting a look from Brandon back there. Hey, Brandon, that's not what you think now. I just want to ask him one question. How did he ever remember all those birthdays and anniversaries